Everything you thought you knew about the Lion King universe is about to be shattered. While fans recognize Mufasa's pride and Scar's outlanders, canonical evidence reveals a third, more dangerous pride that has orchestrated a shadow war against the Pride Lands for generations. This isn't speculation. This is hidden in plain sight. When Mufasa warns Simba about the lands beyond our borders, he isn't simply being cautious. He's acknowledging a very real threat that predates even his own rule. The clues were scattered across multiple films, books, and the recent Mufasa movie, waiting for someone to connect them. Let's piece together this conspiracy that Disney has cleverly hidden from casual viewers. Think about it. Why would Mufasa, the most powerful lion in the Pride Lands, fear shadowy regions like the Elephant Graveyard so intensely? His warnings carry weight beyond simple parental caution. They reflect generational trauma and knowledge of enemies lurking beyond their territory. The territorial markings visible on Pride Rock, those seemingly decorative scratches, appear nearly identical to the markings Kiros makes in the Mufasa film. These aren't random aesthetic choices. They're canonical indicators of territorial disputes between rival prides. This pattern of marking territory through deep scratches appears repeatedly, most notably when Zira drags her claws along surfaces in The Lion King 2. Zira's origins have never been clearly explained in official Disney materials. Where did she come from? How did she develop such fierce loyalty to Scar? And most importantly, why does she share distinctive physical features with the mysterious lion who gave Scar his namesake Scar? The ear notch, the head stripe, the red eyes. These genetic markers suggest a common lineage. The most compelling evidence comes from the new Mufasa movie, which introduces the white outsider lions led by Kiros. These fierce predators attacked Mufasa and Esha before hunting them across vast territories. Their coloration and behavior directly parallel descriptions found in the Lion King books about the mysterious Dunya Pride's destruction. The similar descriptions can't be coincidental. When we examine Mohatu's story about outsider lions, we discover mentions of a pride that kills for pleasure rather than necessity. This pride doesn't follow the circle of life. They actively work against it, causing destruction wherever they roam. Their philosophy directly opposes everything Mufasa stands for. What if the strange lion who manipulated Scar, Kiros's white outsiders, and Zira's original pride are all connected? The timing aligns perfectly. The white lions attacked during Mufasa's youth, the strange lion appeared during Scar's adolescence, and Zira emerged as an adult during Scar's reign. 3 generations of the same hostile pride. Let me be clear. I'm not suggesting loose connections between similar-looking characters. The evidence points to a coordinated multi-generational campaign against Mufasa's bloodline. This third pride represents an ideological opposition to the circle of life philosophy, believing in domination through force rather than balance. Consider this startling possibility. What if Scar wasn't truly the architect of Mufasa's downfall? What if he was merely a pawn in a larger scheme, orchestrated by this third pride? The strange lion attempted to corrupt Scar with the snake's venom, planting the seeds of betrayal years before it bloomed into fratricidal actions. When we examine Zira's backstory from the documents, we learn of her traumatic childhood under an abusive father named Kuzumu. His pride operated under harsh rules that made them outcasts from other lion groups. This description perfectly matches what we know about the white outsiders and their brutal philosophy. The connections deepen when we notice the similar markings between the strange lion and Zira. Not coincidental physical traits, but deliberate visual cues from Disney's artists indicating shared heritage. The distinctive ear notch, head stripe, and aggressive temperament appear in both characters despite their appearances in different films and time periods. This third pride doesn't just represent a physical threat. They embody an ideological opposition to the circle of life itself. Their belief system centers on domination rather than coexistence, viewing Mufasa's philosophy as weakness. Their true goal transcends mere territorial expansion. They seek to fundamentally transform the Pride Lands. Why would Disney create such an elaborate, hidden narrative? Because it adds depth to what might otherwise be simple children's entertainment. The Lion King has always contained mature themes beneath its colorful exterior. This third pride represents the ultimate existential threat, not just to individual lions, but to their entire way of life. But here's the truly shocking revelation. This third pride isn't extinct. Evidence suggests their influence extends into Kiara and Kovu's generation, perhaps explaining why Zira's group is also called Outsiders, despite having no apparent connection to Kiros's original Outsiders. The parallel naming can't be coincidental. If we're correct about this third pride's existence, everything we thought we knew about the major conflicts in the Lion King universe must be reconsidered. Mufasa's demise, Scar's corruption, and even Zira's fanaticism may all be threads in a tapestry woven by this hidden pride over generations. What was their ultimate goal? Why target Mufasa's bloodline specifically? And most importantly, are they still out there waiting to strike again? The answers lie in the deeper evidence and connections we're about to explore. As we examine the fate of the Dunya pride that Sarabi and Serafina escaped from, we'll discover how this connects directly to the white outsiders shown in the Mufasa film. The matching descriptions of destruction, the similar hunting patterns, and the territorial disputes all point to a unified theory that changes everything we thought we knew about the Lion King's villains. But the most disturbing question remains unanswered. If this third pride has been operating in the shadows for generations, manipulating events and corrupting lions from within Mufasa's pride, are they truly gone now? Or are they simply waiting for the right moment to emerge again? To understand this third pride's influence, we must first establish what we know about the established lion groups in the official Lion King canon. The Pridelands lions under Mohatu, Ihati, Mufasa, and later Simba represent stability and adherence to the circle of life. These lions govern through balance and respect for the ecosystem. Their philosophy centers on responsibility and protection rather than domination. Then we have the Outlanders from The Lion King 2, led by Zira. While initially presented as simply Scar's followers, closer examination reveals their origin story is suspiciously vague. Note how they physically differ from Pridelands lions. Lighter fur, leaner bodies, more angular features. But these differences aren't merely aesthetic choices. They're deliberate visual indicators of a separate genetic lineage. Disney animation doesn't make such distinct character designs without purpose. The Outlander's appearance suggests a bloodline separate from both Mufasa's pride and Scar's immediate family. Let's examine what the documents tell us about the mysterious Dunya pride. According to Sarabi's story, this pride was far away from what we now know as the Pridelands, and was considered probably the safest pride to live in. That is, until it was invaded by a flood of hyenas without warning or explanation. But were these really hyenas? The descriptions are suspiciously vague, and the complete destruction of an entire pride by hyenas, when we know hyenas typically hunted in smaller packs, seems improbable. What if this flood actually referred to the white outsider lions we see in the Mufasa film? The timing aligns perfectly. Sarabi and Serafina would have escaped the Dunya pride's destruction shortly before encountering Ahadi and Uru in the Pridelands. This places the attack during the same generation as when Kiros and his white lions began their campaign of territory expansion. Consider the first warning signs described in Sarabi's story. A strange rogue lion appears, screaming, "They are coming! They are near!" This matches exactly how other prides in the Mufasa film described the approach of Kiros's outsiders. The pattern of warning, followed by swift and total destruction, is identical. The Mufasa film provides our clearest look at this third pride. Led by Kiros, these white-furred lions believe in domination through strength alone. When Mufasa kills one of their members in self-defense, Kiros executes one of his own followers for failing. This reveals their brutal internal hierarchy. Failure means termination. Importantly, Kiros declares himself the one true Lion King, a direct ideological challenge to Mufasa's bloodline. This isn't just territorial expansion, it's a philosophical opposition to the very concept of the circle of life. These outsiders believe might makes right, and the strong should rule without constraint. When Kiros scratches the tree while confronting Obasi, he uses the exact same territorial marking gesture that Zira would later use in The Lion King 2. This couldn't be coincidental. It's a learned behavior passed down through generations of the same pride. The parallels to Zira's behavior cannot be ignored. Both Kiros and Zira use identical territorial marking gestures, maintain fanatical control over their followers, execute or punish members who fail them, bear distinctive physical traits, not seen in Pridelands. Lions harbor obsessive grudges against Mufasa's bloodline. Now let's examine the mysterious strange lion from Scar's flashback in The Lion Guard. This unnamed lion, who manipulated young Taka, later Scar, into being bitten by a venomous snake, shares distinctive physical traits with both Kiros's lions and later with Zira. The head stripe, ear notch, and unusually colored eyes. This strange lion told Scar, "You and I have much in common." What if this wasn't just manipulation? What if they genuinely shared a philosophical outlook that opposed Mufasa's circle of life? The strange lion sought to corrupt Taka from within, while Kiros attacked from without. Two strategies from the same oppositional pride. Mohatu's story provides another crucial piece of evidence. The selfish lion, or Choyo, mentioned in the documents bears a striking resemblance to both the strange lion and a Scar. This suggests a genetic or philosophical lineage connecting these characters, possibly indicating that Choyo himself had connections to this third pride. Let's turn to Zira's origin story from the documents. She grew up in a distant part of the Pride Lands, far from the peace and harmony, under leaders named Kuzumu and Azola. This pride was known for being violent and chaotic, living by a harsh set of rules that made them outcasts from other lion groups. Sound familiar? This description perfectly matches what we know about Kiros's outsiders. The matching characterizations can't be coincidental. Disney was deliberately connecting these storylines across different media properties. The connection deepens when we examine Zira's physical features. Her lighter fur tone, angular features, distinctive head stripe, and ear notch directly mirror those of both the strange lion and Kiros's followers. These aren't random design choices, they're deliberate markers of shared lineage. When Kiros's son is killed by Mufasa, his entire pride embarks on a vengeful pursuit. This mirrors exactly how Zira responds when she believes Simba killed Scar, with obsessive, unrelenting vengeance. Both prioritize revenge over their pride's well-being, a sharp contrast to Mufasa and Simba's protective leadership. But what happened to Kiros's pride after their defeat at Malele? The film shows them retreating, but not eliminated. Historical patterns suggest they would regroup in distant territory, perhaps the very outlands where Zira's pride later emerges. Their ideology of strength and domination would continue, passed down to new generations. This changes everything when we realize the connections between these seemingly separate antagonist groups. What if Kiros's pride after their defeat became the very outlanders that would later follow Zira? What if the harsh rules of Zira's pride were direct descendants of Kiros's brutal leadership philosophy? This would explain why Zira's group is also called Outsiders, despite having no apparent connection to Kiros's original outsiders in the film's narrative. The parallel naming isn't coincidental, it's a deliberate clue left by Disney storytellers. Remember how in The Lion King 2, Zira claims special knowledge about the roar of the elders that even Kion doesn't possess? She states, "Scar and I were close, very close." But what if her knowledge came not just from Scar, but from her own pride's history of opposing Mufasa's bloodline and studying their powers? The more we examine these connections, the clearer it becomes that this third pride represents a persistent, multi-generational threat to the circle of life philosophy. Their campaign against Mufasa's bloodline spans multiple films, books, and time periods within the story. Consider how differently Mufasa treats the hyenas versus other threats. While he's willing to chase away hyenas at the borders, his warnings about lands beyond Pride Rock carry a deeper dread. He's not just concerned about scavengers, he's aware of a more fundamental threat to his pride and philosophy. All these canonical elements, from Mohatu's stories to the Mufasa film, from Zira's background to Scar's corruption, point to a consistent third force operating against Mufasa's bloodline. Their actions aren't random. They're calculated moves in a generational struggle for control of the Pride Lands. But how exactly do they operate? What specific evidence proves their continued influence across generations? And most importantly, how did they nearly succeed in destroying the Pride Lands through Scar? The answers lie in the subtle connections and hidden details we'll explore next. The question isn't whether this third pride exists. The evidence is too substantial to deny. The real question is how deeply their influence penetrated the events we thought we understood. As we examine the evidence chain more closely, we'll discover just how close they came to victory. Now that we've established the foundation, let's examine the specific evidence that connects these seemingly disparate villains into one continuous threat against Mufasa's bloodline. First, let's analyze the distinctive physical traits shared across generations of this third pride. The strange lion who manipulated Scar displays the same head stripe, ear notch, and unusually colored eyes that we later see in Zira. These aren't common features among Prideland lions. They're genetic markers of a separate bloodline. When we look at Kairos' white outsiders, we notice a similar angular build and stance that later appears in Zira's outlanders. The visual parallels extend beyond coincidence. Disney's character designers deliberately maintained consistency to hint at these connections without explicitly stating them. The territorial marking behavior provides our strongest physical evidence. When Kairos confronts Obasi, he drags his claws along the tree in a distinctive territorial marking gesture. Years later, Zira performs the identical motion when marking territory in the Outlands. This specific behavior isn't shown by any Pridelands lions, because it's a learned cultural practice passed down through generations of the same pride. But the connections go beyond physical traits and behaviors. The philosophical opposition to the circle of life remains consistent across all three antagonist groups. Kairos believes in rule through strength alone. The strange lion seeks to corrupt from within. And Zira indoctrinates her followers to reject Simba's balanced leadership. The documents reveal that Zira grew up under Kuzumu, whose pride operated under harsh rules that made them outcasts from other lion groups. This perfectly describes the remnants of Kairos' defeated outsiders. A once powerful pride reduced to living on the margins, maintaining their brutal ideology while plotting their return to power. Consider the strategic evolution across generations. Kairos attempted direct confrontation against Mufasa and failed. The strange lion then shifted to a new approach, corruption from within by targeting Taka Scar. Finally, Zira employs both strategies simultaneously, raising Kovu as an infiltrator while preparing her pride for direct conflict. This strategic adaptation suggests a continuous leadership passing down knowledge of previous failures, refining their approach with each generation. It's not random villainy. It's calculated opposition evolving through trial and error. When we examine the timing of these threats, perfect continuity emerges. Kairos attacks during Mufasa's youth. The strange lion corrupts Taka during his adolescence. Zira emerges as Scar's most devoted follower during his reign. And finally, Zira continues the campaign against Simba after Scar's demise. This changes everything when we realize that Scar wasn't the mastermind we thought. He was a weapon crafted by this third pride to destroy Mufasa's bloodline from within. His corruption began long before he killed Mufasa, planted like a seed by the strange lion's venomous snake. The venom itself provides crucial evidence. As Rafiki explains in The Lion Guard, the cobra's venom that scarred Taka will make you lose control of knowing what is wrong and right if left untreated. This wasn't random. It was a deliberate attempt to corrupt Mufasa's brother into a weapon against the Pridelands. The strange lion tells Scar, "You have the same conniving mind that made Scar so powerful." This statement has puzzled fans for years. How could the strange lion reference Scar when talking to Taka before he adopted that name? Unless Scar was a title or position within this third pride, passed down through generations. The parallel naming cannot be ignored. Kairos followers are called outsiders in the Mufasa film. Years later, Zira's followers are also called outsiders, despite having no explicit connection in the narrative. This isn't coincidence, it's continuity deliberately embedded by Disney's storytellers. Let's examine Zira's extreme devotion to Scar. While presented as fanatical loyalty, her behavior makes more sense if she was actually continuing her own pride's multi-generational campaign against Mufasa's bloodline. Scar was their greatest success, the internal saboteur who accomplished what external attacks could not. The documents reveal that after Mufasa defeats Kairos, many of his followers scatter rather than perish. Where would these lions go? The harsh, resource-poor outlands would be the perfect refuge, the very same territory where Zira's pride later emerges. When comparing hunting techniques, we find another connection. The documents describe how Kairos' lions hunt for pleasure rather than necessity, killing more than they need. This exact behavior is later attributed to Zira's outlanders, who are described as having killed for a pound of flesh, even among themselves. The strange lion's manipulation of Scar reveals the third pride's greatest insight. That direct confrontation against Mufasa would fail, but corrupting his brother could succeed. This wasn't random malice. It was calculated strategy refined through generations of conflict. Zira's knowledge of the Roar of the Elders suggests access to historical information beyond what Scar could have taught her. She claims, Scar and I were close, but her understanding of the Roar's limitations indicates deeper knowledge passed down through her own, Pride's history of studying and opposing Mufasa's bloodline. The most compelling evidence comes from comparing the motivations across generations. Kiros wanted to establish himself as the one true Lion King, a direct challenge to Mufasa's lineage. The strange lion sought to corrupt Taka into betraying Mufasa. Zira focused obsessively on installing Kovu as Scar's heir to the throne. The consistent goal across generations: displace Mufasa's bloodline from power. This isn't three separate villains with similar goals. It's one continuous campaign adapting its strategy across generations while maintaining its core objective. The visual, behavioral, and philosophical connections are too numerous and specific to be coincidental. When we examine how Zira trains Kovu, another connection emerges. She emphasizes the same brutal philosophy we saw in Kiros's Pride: strength above all, elimination of the weak, and domination rather than cooperation. These aren't just villainous traits, they're specific ideological positions passed down through generations. The documents describe how Kuzumu, Zira's father, killed her mother when she showed compassion to Zira. This mirrors exactly how Kiros executed his own follower for failure, maintaining pride purity through deadly enforcement. This parallel reveals the consistent internal practices of this third pride across generations. Consider how different Zira's outlanders appear from both Prideland's lions and Scar himself. Their lighter coloration, distinctive head stripes, and angular features more closely resemble Kairos's white lions than Mufasa's pride. These aren't aesthetic choices. They're deliberate visual cues indicating separate genetic lineage. The most disturbing connection appears when we compare the ultimate goals of each antagonist. Kiros sought to replace Mufasa's circle of life with rule by strength. The strange lion attempted to corrupt the Pridelands from within. Zira worked to install Kovu as Scar's heir, continuing the same mission across generations. The pattern becomes undeniable when we track the consistent focus on Mufasa's bloodline. Despite numerous other prides existing across the Lion King universe, this third pride singularly targets Mufasa's lineage with unwavering determination. This isn't random. It's an ideological opposition to what Mufasa represents. When Zira tells Kovu that Simba is the enemy, she's not just expressing personal vengeance. She's continuing her pride's multi-generational campaign against Mufasa's circle of life philosophy. Her indoctrination of Kovu parallels exactly how Kuzumu treated her, continuing the cycle of ideological transmission. The geographical progression adds further evidence. Kiros's pride attacks from the far outlands, eventually being pushed back. The strange lion appears closer to the Pridelands, able to interact with Taka. Zira's outlanders live at the very borders of the Pridelands. This shows the third pride gradually advancing their position over generations. Let's consider the timing once more. Kairos attacks during Mufasa's youth. The strange lion corrupts Taka in adolescence. Zira emerges during Scar's reign, and Zira's plan against Simba unfolds during Kiara's youth. This perfect generational alignment suggests coordinated, continuous opposition rather than separate threats. But the most chilling evidence comes from examining what happens during Scar's reign. The Pridelands transform from lush paradise to barren wasteland, exactly matching what happened to other territories after Kiros's pride conquered them. This wasn't just Scar's mismanagement, it was the fulfillment of the third pride's destructive philosophy. When we look at how quickly the Pridelands recover after Simba's return, it suggests the devastation wasn't just natural drought, but active sabotage of the ecosystem. This aligns perfectly with the third pride's opposition to the circle of life. They sought not just to rule the Pridelands, but to fundamentally transform them. This changes everything when we realize the hyenas might have been unwitting pawns in this larger scheme. The third pride would have recognized them as the perfect scapegoats. Destructive enough to ruin the Pridelands under Scar's leadership, but ultimately disposable when they served their purpose. The lioness's resistance during Scar's reign makes more sense in this context. They weren't just opposing Scar's poor leadership, They were resisting a fundamental transformation of their home into the kind of territory ruled by this third pride. Where might makes right and the circle of life holds no meaning. Even Scar's final betrayal of the hyenas aligns with this third pride's philosophy. When cornered, he immediately sacrifices his allies to save himself, exactly as Kiros executed his own follower for failure, and how Kuzumu killed Zira's mother for showing compassion. But perhaps the most compelling evidence is what happens after Zira's demise. Her followers immediately abandon her cause and join Simba's pride. This makes little sense if they were truly devoted to Scar, but makes perfect sense if they were the latest generation of this third pride, recognizing that their multi-generational campaign had finally failed. The consistency across multiple films, books, and time periods within the story cannot be explained away as coincidence or parallel development. Disney's storytellers deliberately constructed this hidden narrative, leaving just enough connections for attentive viewers to discover. But if this third pride has been operating against Mufasa's bloodline for generations, manipulating events from the shadows, one crucial question remains. What was their ultimate goal? And more importantly, did their influence truly end with Zira's demise, or does it continue into Kiara and Kovu's generation? The answers lie in examining how this third pride's actions fundamentally reshaped the Pridelands, and whether their influence continues even after their apparent defeat. As we'll discover, their hidden influence explains many of the seemingly inexplicable events throughout the Lion King saga. Now that we've established the existence of this third pride through generations, let's examine how they fundamentally reshaped the Lion King universe by influencing its central characters. Their shadow war against Mufasa's bloodline explains seemingly inexplicable behaviors and events throughout the saga. First, consider how this third pride's actions directly created the Scar we know. Before encountering the strange lion and his venomous snake, Taka was merely jealous of Mufasa, not murderous. The documents describe him as adventurous and kind of capricious, but not inherently evil. The venom that scarred him didn't just mark his face, it corrupted his mind. According to Rafiki's explanation in The Lion Guard, the cobra's venom will make you lose control of knowing what is wrong and right if left untreated. This wasn't random. It was a deliberate attempt to weaponize Mufasa's brother against him, turning family bond into deadly liability. This explains one of the Lion King's greatest mysteries: why Scar's personality shifts so dramatically between his flashback appearances and the main film. The untreated venom progressively corrupted him, transforming youthful jealousy into murderous ambition. He wasn't born a villain. He was crafted into one by this third pride. Mufasa's leadership style suddenly makes more sense in this context. His frequent warnings about dangers beyond the Pridelands weren't paranoia. They reflected genuine knowledge of this persistent threat. His cautious rule and emphasis on tradition weren't just personality traits. They were defensive measures against an enemy he knew was waiting for weakness. When Mufasa tells Simba, "Everything the light touches is our kingdom," he's not just defining boundaries. He's distinguishing between the safe, balanced ecosystem he maintains and the shadowy territories ruled by this third pride's destructive philosophy. His warnings carry the weight of generational knowledge. Consider Mufasa's seemingly extreme reaction to Simba entering the elephant graveyard. His fear wasn't just about hyenas. It was about boundary territories where this third pride might have scouts or influence. His anger reflected knowledge that these areas represented genuine existential threat to his son and heir. The documents reveal that Sarabi and Serafina escaped from the Dunya Pride's destruction, likely at the hands of Kiros's outsiders. This experience would have given them first-hand knowledge of this third pride's brutality, explaining why they so strongly supported Mufasa's protective leadership style. When we examine Scar's interactions with the hyenas, another layer emerges. His manipulation of them as disposable tools mirrors exactly how the third pride operates, using others until they're no longer useful, then discarding them. This wasn't just villainy, it was a specific philosophical approach learned from the strange lion's influence. This changes everything. When we realize the drought and famine during Scar's reign might not have been accidental. The Prideland's transformation into barren wasteland perfectly matched what happened to other territories after Kiros' pride conquered them. What if Scar was implementing the third pride's ecosystem-destroying practices, deliberately or unconsciously? The hyena's role becomes clearer as well. Rather than simple scavengers, they were unwitting instruments in this larger plan, perfect for destroying the delicate balance of the Pridelands while taking the blame for its collapse. Their excessive hunting wasn't just hunger, it was part of a systematic dismantling of the circle of life. Scar's seemingly erratic behavior during his reign makes more sense viewed through this lens. His paranoia, volatility, and increasingly poor decisions weren't just bad leadership, they were symptoms of ongoing venomous corruption, exactly as the strange lion intended when he orchestrated the snakebite years earlier. When we consider Zira's obsession with training Kovu to fulfill Scar's dying wish, a deeper pattern emerges. She wasn't just following Scar's instructions, she was continuing her own pride's multi-generational campaign. Kovu was being groomed not just as Scar's heir, but as the next instrument of this third pride's ongoing war. The physical transformation of the Pride lands during Scar's reign deserves closer examination. The barren, gray landscape doesn't just represent drought, it visually mirrors the territories ruled by Kiros' outsiders, devoid of cooperation, dominated by the strong at the expense of the ecosystem. This wasn't natural disaster, it was ideological transformation. Mufasa's spirit appearing to Simba takes on new significance in this context. His intervention wasn't just paternal guidance, it represented the circle of life philosophy, actively resisting the third pride's destructive influence. The spiritual realm itself seemed to oppose their attempt to transform the Pride lands. But perhaps most revealing is how quickly the Pride lands recover after Simba's return. Natural drought recovery wouldn't happen so rapidly, but the restoration of the circle of life philosophy could indeed trigger such dramatic revival. This suggests the devastation was more ideological than natural. Zira's knowledge of the roar of the elders indicates something crucial. This third pride had been studying Mufasa's bloodline's powers for generations, seeking ways to counter or corrupt them. Her specific claim that Scar lost the roar when he used it against his fellow lions reveals deep historical research into the Pride Land's royal powers. The Third Pride's multi-generational focus on corrupting or eliminating Mufasa's bloodline suggests they recognize something spiritually significant about this lineage. Their opposition wasn't just territorial, it was philosophical, perhaps even metaphysical, challenging the very foundation of the circle of life. Consider how differently the Third Pride operates compared to other antagonists in the Lion King universe. Hyenas are opportunistic scavengers. Rogue lions like Nuka act from personal ambition. But this third pride maintains consistent ideological opposition across generations. They're not just villains, they're philosophical revolutionaries. When Zira trains Kovu, she emphasizes that Simba is the enemy. Not just her enemy, but an enemy to their entire way of life. This framing reveals the deeper conflict at work. Two fundamentally opposed philosophies of existence, with the Pride Lands as both physical territory and ideological battleground. The strange lion's statement to Scar, "You and I have much in common," takes on new meaning in this light. He wasn't just manipulating Taka, he was recognizing a potential convert to their philosophy, someone who could be turned against his own pride's fundamental beliefs. The most disturbing revelation comes from examining what happens during the climactic battle in The Lion King 2. When Kiara convinces both prides that we are one, she's not just resolving a specific conflict. She's ending a philosophical war that began generations before her birth. Her insight represents the ultimate defeat of the Third Pride's separatist ideology. Zira's refusal to accept this unity, choosing to fall rather than join Simba's pride, makes perfect sense in this context. She wasn't just rejecting personal salvation. She was refusing to abandon the core belief system that had defined her pride for generations. Her final choice was ideological, not just personal. When the other Outlanders immediately accept Kiara's perspective, it reveals something profound. Many of Zira's followers weren't true believers in the Third Pride's philosophy, but captives to its dominance. Given the chance to embrace the circle of life, they immediately abandoned generations of opposition. This changes everything. When we realize the Third Pride's ultimate goal wasn't just controlling territory or avenging specific grievances, it was replacing the circle of life with rule by strength alone. Their multi-generational campaign targeted Mufasa's bloodline because they recognized it as the living embodiment of the philosophy they opposed. The true significance of Kovu and Kiara's union emerges in this light. Their relationship doesn't just end a specific conflict, it represents the final reconciliation of two fundamentally opposed worldviews. Kovu's acceptance into Simba's pride symbolizes the integration of the Third Pride's strength without its destructive philosophy. But the most chilling question remains. Was this truly the end of the third pride's influence? While Zira's immediate followers joined Simba's pride, what about other lions who shared their philosophy? What if isolated pockets of this third pride still exist beyond the Pride Lands, maintaining their opposition to the circle of life? The consistent pattern of regeneration throughout the Lion King saga suggests this conflict might not be truly over. Kairos's defeat led to the Strange Lion's more subtle approach. The Strange Lion's corruption of Scar led to Zira's dual strategy of infiltration and direct conflict. What new form might this opposition take in future generations? Consider the white lions that appear in the Lion Guard series, or the mysterious threats mentioned but never shown in the later stories. These could represent the continued evolution of this third pride, adapting once again after their previous strategies failed. When we examine Keon's journey to the Tree of Life, another possibility emerges. The various enemies he encounters along the way share distinctive characteristics with this third pride, specifically their philosophy that might makes right. What if these scattered antagonists represent fragments of the once unified third pride? But the most disturbing possibility comes from considering what happens after Kovu joins Simba's pride. While he personally rejected the third pride's philosophy, he still carries their bloodline. What if some aspect of their ideology remains dormant, waiting for the right conditions to re-emerge in future generations? This would explain why the Lions of the Night Pride at the Tree of Life remain so vigilant against outside threats. Perhaps they're not just protecting a healing ground, but maintaining awareness of this third pride's continued existence beyond known territories. The question isn't whether this third pride existed. The evidence is overwhelming. The real question is whether their defeat was truly complete, or if their influence continues in ways we haven't yet recognized. As we examine the consequences of their multi-generational campaign, we'll discover just how deeply they've shaped the world of the Lion King. But before we conclude, we must address the most troubling implication of all. If this third pride came so close to victory through Scar, what prevents a similar attempt in the future? The answer lies in understanding the full extent of their influence, and whether their philosophy truly ended with Zira's fall. The third pride's multi-generational campaign against Mufasa's bloodline has permanently altered the Lion King universe in ways that continue to resonate long after Zira's demise. Their influence extends beyond their direct actions, reshaping the very foundations of the Pride Lands and its neighboring territories. First, let's consider the permanent changes to the Pride Lands' geography and ecosystem. The devastating drought during Scar's reign wasn't just a temporary setback. It fundamentally transformed parts of the territory. The Elephant Graveyard's expansion, the creation of the Outlands as a separate territory, and the establishment of border regions all resulted directly from this third pride's influence. These geographical changes mirror what happens in real African landscapes after territorial disputes between lion prides. Researchers at wildlife preserves have documented how dominant prides will establish buffer zones between territories, creating ecological dead zones that can take decades to recover. The Outlands represent exactly this type of disputed territory. The sociological impact runs even deeper. Consider how the Pride Land's social structure transformed across generations. Mufasa maintained rigid borders and strict rules, not from authoritarianism but as protection against this known threat. Simba initially attempted to maintain these boundaries but ultimately embraced greater openness after Kiara's intervention. This evolution reflects a Pride Lands responding to external pressure, then gradually relaxing as the threat recedes. Studies of lion prides in Tanzania's Serengeti have documented similar patterns. Defensive, territorial behavior during periods of competition with rival prides, followed by expansion during periods of relative peace. When we examine pride dynamics in Kenya's Masai Mara, we find striking parallels to the Lion King universe. Researchers have observed how rival prides will sometimes attempt to infiltrate competitors by sending young males to integrate with neighboring groups. Exactly the strategy Zira attempted with Kovu. But the psychological consequences may be the most significant and lasting. The generational trauma experienced by the Pride Lands lions fundamentally shaped their society. Sarabi and Serafina carried the memory of the Dunya pride's destruction. Mufasa bore the weight of constant vigilance against the third pride. Simba inherited suspicion of outsiders that nearly prevented Kovu's integration. This trauma doesn't disappear with Zira's defeat. It becomes embedded in the pride's collective memory and culture. Even as Kovu and Kiara establish a more open leadership, The awareness of potential threats beyond their borders would remain part of their inherited wisdom. Real lion prides demonstrate similar psychological adaptations. Studies in Botswana's Okavango Delta have documented how prides that experience territorial conflicts develop distinct behavioral patterns that persist for generations after the original threat has passed. These include increased vigilance, more frequent territorial marking, and heightened response to unfamiliar sounds or scents. This changes everything when we recognize that the third pride's most lasting impact wasn't physical but ideological. Their greatest achievement wasn't the temporary rule through Scar, but the permanent introduction of doubt into the circle of life philosophy. After experiencing their destructive alternative, the Pride Lands lions could never again take their harmonious worldview for granted. This ideological challenge forced evolution in the circle of life concept itself. What began as Mufasa's somewhat rigid understanding developed through Simba into a more adaptive philosophy, capable of incorporating elements of change while maintaining its core principles. This philosophical evolution strengthened rather than weakened the Pride Lands. The integration of former Outlanders into Simba's pride represents not just social reconciliation but philosophical synthesis. Kovu brings valuable qualities from his outsider upbringing: strength, resilience, adaptability, while embracing the cooperative principles of the circle of life. This integration creates a stronger, more robust pride than either pure tradition or pure strength could achieve alone. Consider how differently the Pride Lands operates after absorbing elements of the Third Pride through Kovu and the Reformed Outlanders. We see increased emphasis on strength and vigilance alongside traditional circle of life values. This isn't compromise but evolution. The Pride Lands becoming more resilient by incorporating aspects of their former adversaries. Real African lion conservation efforts demonstrate similar principles. The most successful programs don't just protect existing prides, but facilitate genetic diversity through carefully managed integration of outside lions. This prevents inbreeding while maintaining territorial stability. Exactly the balance Kiara and Kovu achieve in the Pride Lands. The Third Pride's influence extends to the very narrative structure of the Lion King universe. What began as a straightforward hero's journey in the original film evolved into a more complex story of reconciliation and integration in the sequel. This narrative evolution directly reflects the Third Pride's challenge to simple good versus evil dichotomies. But perhaps the most significant consequence is how the Third Pride's actions fundamentally change the Pride Lands' relationship with neighboring territories. Before their influence, Mufasa maintained strict isolation. After experiencing their threat, the Pride evolved toward cautious diplomacy under Simba, and finally to active cooperation under Kiara and Kovu. This evolution mirrors real changes in African conservation approaches. Early preservation efforts focused on isolation and protection, while modern strategies emphasize wildlife corridors and cross-border cooperation. The Pride Lands' diplomatic evolution parallels this real-world shift in conservation philosophy. When we examine Kion's journey to the Tree of Life, we discover another lasting impact of the Third Pride. The various predator teams he encounters, Makucha's leopards, the snow leopards, and others, display hallmarks of this Third Pride's philosophy, suggesting their influence spread far beyond the Pride Lands. The most disturbing possibility emerges when we consider whether elements of the Third Pride might still exist in regions beyond Kion's exploration. The white outsider lions weren't entirely eliminated in their conflict with Mufasa. They retreated to unknown territories. What if distant pockets of this pride continue their opposition to the circle of life in lands we haven't yet seen? Real distribution patterns of lion populations across Africa suggest this is entirely plausible. Recent studies have discovered previously unknown lion populations in remote regions of Ethiopia, Sudan, and the Central African Republic. These isolated groups develop distinct behaviors and social structures adapted to their specific environments. When Rafiki examines his ancient paintings in The Lion King 2, he recognizes Kovu and Kiara's potential unity as fulfillment of old prophecies. This suggests the conflict with the Third Pride wasn't unexpected, but part of a larger pattern recognized by previous generations of Pride Lands wisdom keepers. This changes everything. When we realize that the strange lion who corrupted Scar may not have been acting independently, but as an agent of a larger pride, extending beyond the borders of known territories. His statement that "you have the same conniving mind that made Scar so powerful" suggests knowledge of previous lions who held the Scar title or position. This raises the chilling possibility that the Scar we know wasn't the first, but rather the latest in a line of lions corrupted by this third pride to serve as internal saboteurs against rival prides. The name itself might be a designation within their hierarchy rather than merely a reference to a physical mark. The documents mention the mark of evil in relation to the strange lion, the distinctive scar across the eye. What if this isn't just description, but designation? What if this physical marking is deliberately inflicted on chosen agents of this third pride, identifying them as dedicated opponents of the circle of life? Consider the implications if this third pride operates not just as a territorial rival, but as an ideological opposition movement with distributed cells across multiple territories. Their influence would extend far beyond the immediate borders of the Pride Lands, potentially threatening the circle of life philosophy wherever it exists. This would explain why Kion encounters so many opponents sharing similar philosophical positions during his journeys. Rather than coincidental similarity, these various predator groups might represent extensions of the third pride's influence, not directly controlled but ideologically aligned. The apparent defeat of this third pride through Zira may be illusory. While their direct conflict with the Pride Lands ended, their philosophical opposition to the circle of life could continue through other agents and in other territories. The battle Kiara won might be just one front in a larger ideological war. But there's hope in this darker interpretation. The integration of Kovu and the reformed Outlanders demonstrates that even those raised within the Third Pride's destructive philosophy can recognize the value of the circle of life. Their conversion suggests the possibility of wider reconciliation beyond the Pride Lands borders. When Kiara declares, "We are one," she's not just addressing the immediate conflict, but articulating a universal principle that directly counters the Third Pride's divisive philosophy. This insight represents not just tactical victory, but ideological triumph, a fundamental refutation of their core belief in strength through domination. The Lion Guard's expanded scope under Kion represents recognition of this wider conflict. By extending protection beyond Pride Land's borders, Kion acknowledges that maintaining the circle of life requires active defense against opposing philosophies, not just territorial management. The final significance of this third pride's influence lies in how it forced evolution in the circle of life philosophy itself. What began as Mufasa's somewhat simplistic understanding developed through challenge and opposition into a more robust worldview, capable of incorporating strength without sacrificing cooperation. This philosophical evolution parallels real developments in ecological understanding. Early conservation focused on preservation through isolation, while modern approaches recognize the need for managed integration and adaptation. The Pride Lands evolution mirrors this shift from simple preservation to dynamic equilibrium. The ultimate victory against this third pride wasn't defeating them militarily, but transcending the false dichotomy they represented. By integrating former Outlanders while maintaining core circle of life principles, Kiara and Kovu created something stronger than either pure tradition or pure strength could achieve alone. Real African lion conservation demonstrates the wisdom of this approach. The healthiest lion populations exist not in isolated preserves but in connected ecosystems with managed genetic diversity. Strength through cooperation rather than domination, exactly the principle Kiara articulated in her intervention. But the final question remains, is this truly the end of the Third Pride's influence? Or does their opposition continue in forms we haven't yet recognized? The Lion King universe leaves this deliberately ambiguous, suggesting the conflict between philosophical approaches to existence continues even as specific battles conclude. This ambiguity reflects real ecological understanding. There is no final victory in natural systems, only ongoing adaptation to changing pressures. The Pride Lands evolution doesn't represent conclusive triumph, but successful adaptation to one particular threat. With awareness that new challenges will inevitably emerge, the lasting legacy of this third pride isn't defeat, but transformation. By forcing the Pride Lands lions to defend and articulate their core values, this opposition ultimately strengthened rather than weakened the circle of life philosophy. Challenge created resilience through adaptation rather than rigid preservation. In the final analysis, this third pride represents not just villainous opposition, but necessary catalyst for growth. Without their challenge, the Pride Lands might have stagnated in rigid tradition, rather than evolving toward the more dynamic, inclusive community we see by the saga's conclusion. This interpretation doesn't diminish their antagonistic role, but recognizes the complex ecological truth that opposition often drives evolution. The Third Pride's destructive philosophy ultimately failed, but the adaptation it forced created a stronger Pride lands than would have existed without their challenge. As we consider the future of the Lion King universe, the question isn't whether this Third Pride will return in recognizable form, but how their philosophical opposition might manifest in new challenges. The cycle of challenge and adaptation continues beyond any specific victory or defeat. The true meaning of the circle of life emerges through this understanding. Not static balance, but dynamic adaptation. Not absence of conflict, but productive integration of opposing forces. The Third Pride's greatest contribution was forcing articulation and evolution of this deeper wisdom. And so we return to where we began, with a seemingly simple children's story revealing complex, ecological, and philosophical truths. The Third Pride wasn't just hidden antagonist, but essential participant in the larger circle, playing their role in challenging, strengthening, and ultimately transforming the Pride lands. The question for the future isn't whether new opposition will emerge, but what form it will take, and how the Pride lands will continue to adapt, integrate, and evolve in response to challenges yet unseen. The circle continues, unbroken but ever-changing, just as it does in the real African landscapes that inspired this enduring story.